Hey everybody, this is Perch, and we've got a viewer mail here, and it basically goes, "Hello, Mr. Perch." You don't need to call me Mr. Perch is my father. I'm Dr. Perch. Sorry, no. I've been watching your videos for the best part of last year. I particularly like your videos discussing stats, which I found very interesting and informative. I do need to get back to doing more of those. I usually listen to them while I'm cooking or driving, and while I had a long drive ahead of me yesterday, I could not bear to watch your latest video. It would be nice if there were diverse stories with diversity. I could not watch it, not because I was afraid of that dreadful intro song, but because I thought the content was going to be particularly inflammatory. I'm simply incredibly tired with the entire argument. I'm not accusing you, and I think you shared a similar sentiment in the past, along with very agreeable opinions on the matter, but still, I find myself wanting to ask you this. As a comic book fan, comic book publisher, comic book shop owner, but most importantly as an American, do you really care about diversity this much? All right, let me pause here for a second, and we'll go back to the mail. First off, totally get it. And this is what I was trying to communicate, I think, at different times, saying I'm sick of SJW style content. It's not that some of the material in those videos aren't making a good point. Some do make a good point. Some don't. It kind of goes back and forth. It's just it gets tiring. It gets it's that you said it well. I'm incredibly tired with the entire argument. Put it a different way. I like whiskey. If somebody came to me every day and goes, "Hey, you like whiskey?" Yes, I like whiskey. Whiskey is the best, isn't it? Yes, it's great. I like it. And this continued for like a month. I'd get tired of certainly the conversation. I'd probably still drink the whiskey, but I'd be like, enough. Enough. We've established this point. We don't need to keep going over it. And actually, that whole point is actually a good commentary on the whole topic at large of diversity. But I'll get more to that in a second. So back to the mail. It says, personally, as I've been reading comics for almost 15 years now, all my closest friends are horrid weebs, and we spend thousands of hours along the years discussing comics. We've had more fights than I care to count on whether Goku is stronger than Hulk. I've been a regular to a few comic shops before the virus hit, and there too I spent hundreds of hours talking to other fans. I've been to dozens of conventions where I got to chat with national level artists and indie artists and only publish on their website. I feel confident saying I've had at least a few thousand discussions over comics, and I must say, not even one of them has been about diversity. Not in favor or not against it. At least until this year, where a few people asked me what the hell was going on in comics in America. I forgot to mention I'm not American. we got that. Sorry. Every time I tune to American media, I'm baffled with how obsessed you seem to be with race, sex, orientation, and so on. Dude, tell me about it. Like, if you like news, and I do like to be informed of what's going on in the news, it's a hell of a time to be an American. I mean, it sucks. Our news sucks. Hard sucks. And what's even worse in the US is people are obsessed now with CNN versus Fox or MSNBC, CNN, Fox. They all suck. You may find one of their flavors more palatable to your particular ideology, but if you're trying to get information, they blow. Anyway, we continue. He goes on about American media being crappy for a while, and I'm with you. I know for a fact this is not the case everywhere else on the planet. Not everywhere. There are other regions that are obsessed like this, for sure. Manga, where most, if not all, characters and artists tend to be Japanese, sell perfectly well in every nation in the world. I know Yoei comics, where the entire cast is populated by gay men, sell perfectly well to women for some reason. There's reasons behind that, and that's probably a video all in itself. But anyway, why then are American comic books so obsessed with statistically perfect representation, diversity, and so on? Does diversity matter at all? I think that as a comic book quote-unquote expert and store owner, you could enlighten me on this matter better than any other source. Has anyone in your shop ever discussed representation? Has any artist talked to you about it in person? Does anyone ever enter your store asking for the most Black, Hispanic, French people in it? Okay, great. 3 different questions. So first off, yeah, great mail. Here's how I feel about diversity. When I say, I do like diversity in comics, but what I mean by diversity is probably different from what you're thinking. I like diversity of stories. I like diversity of plots, of concepts and ideas. And if you take that to its ultimate conclusion in that way, then you are going to get, different characters. You're going to get more than just, white male characters. You're going to get a variety of characters because very diverse stories will demand it. But it's the diverse story that's driving that. It's not a statistical, we have to have this exact, representation of demographics going on. And I think that's where things have gotten really screwed up in the US. Now, I'll give you two examples. I've used the X-Men a lot in the past, but let me fast forward a little bit further into the run when they introduced Bishop. I liked Bishop. I thought Bishop was a pretty cool character. It was a different concept. The X-Men had fooled around with Days of Future Past and these kind of dystopian future timelines before. So this idea that you introduce this new character was pretty cool. And I like the fact that well, I don't remember thinking, nor do I remember people I talked to, like you, thousands of hours in a comic shop, going, "Oh my God, it's so cool! There's a black guy in this comic." It wasn't that. However, if they had created this very generic, crop top white Schwarzenegger kind of clone as Bishop, I don't think the character would have been as popular. If they would have just made like Captain America, only a mutant version, with same look, same everything else, I think it would have been more of a yawn of a character. It wasn't that people were like, finally, a black guy. It was, hey, here's a kind of different looking, interesting character. He's black, and that is good. That it's not the same old character. It had a lot less to do with the character's race and the fact that the character's design was interesting, looked unique. They were doing cool things with it, and it worked. I'd argue the same thing is true if you look at the X-Men, and I used the picture in the previous video, or in a previous video, where you had the original X-Men, the five, and you had the giant size X-Men team next to it. So you had the Iceman, the old original Stan Lee, Iceman, Angel, Beast, Cyclops, Marvel Girl in their original costumes, and then they're stacked up next to, Storm and Wolverine and Nightcrawler and Colossus, and it's striking because the new X-Men team looks very different, looks very diverse, but the diversity isn't just the races. I mean, Storm's there, but I mean, generally, it's you got metal guy, you got blue demon guy, you got Canadian. It looked different. It looked unique, and that's the kind of diversity that I think really sold well in the 70s and 80s. Is that they were telling different stories around the world, different aspects of things. The races of the characters were, I don't want to say an afterthought because that sounds like it was dismissive, but it wasn't what they led with. It just made sense because they were telling diverse stories. And I care a lot about that. And I'll bet if you think about some of the conversations you had in a comic shop, that's the kind of underlying thing people would talk about or think about, is that these stories are unique. Nobody goes in, not nobody, but very few people would go into a comic shop and go, hey, I like the story with all the black people in it. That'd be a weird thing to say. But you could see somebody going in and saying, "Hey, have you checked out Milestone? Those comics are pretty cool. They've got some different origins to the characters. They've got some different things going on. This story feels very original. It feels very unique." I'm with you. In all the time I've spent in a comic shop, I don't remember people coming in and going, "Man, I like this comic book because there were statistically more black people in it than in the comic book the month before." Nobody talked like that. Now, in fairness, I did have people come in saying, "Hey, do you know if there's a Puerto Rican superhero or there's a, just various Brazilian superhero?" I would have people ask that question, and I'd have people kind of want to buy those comics. But even there, I don't think they were trying to buy it saying, "I really need the comic book with the particular kind of shade of brown that I'm looking for in a character." That's not how they thought. They wanted something that was more reflective of the culture or the environment of what they're going for. I remember the person who came in wanting the story of a Puerto Rican character, and there was some X-Men that was some character in the X universe that was Puerto Rican, as I recall, and the name is skipping. And when we found the comic, the buyer wasn't interested in it because it wasn't like they were having an adventure in Puerto Rico or that there was anything about it. It was just that this character was shoved into Westchester in the mansion with everybody else, and it didn't matter. I remember people complaining to some extent about later adventures with Sunspot. That it's like, hey, you've got this Brazilian character, but we don't see him in Brazil. No, he did in the earlier issues, but they don't take advantage of the fact that there's this whole environment in this area and this this interesting thing they can do with this character. They just it's like, hey, he's hanging out in the danger room. And I think that when you talk about diversity today and you look at the comics, it strikes me that it does feel like people are obsessed with this one line that they say over and over again. They need to the reader wants to see themselves in the comic. And what's funny about that is that's never been that's never been what I've seen. I think people like to imagine, especially kids, they like to imagine kind of heroics and them being in those costumes. But I mean, as you know, if you listen to this channel, I hung out in an area with a heavy Native American population, Navajo Indians, for a long time, where I was the minority in terms of, there were a lot more Navajos than mostly white people there. And when it came time for Halloween or other things, I mean, these kids would dress up like Spider-Man and Captain America and Superman. None of them were like, I can't dress up like Superman because I'm Navajo, I'm not white. That wasn't a topic. That was never a topic with the kids. In many cases, and now as a father of two girls, and I've heard some of the conversations that go on, I see these idiot parents who are like, oh man, I really wish that. The great thing about Miles Morales is that finally there's a black Spider-Man. So, the black children can feel comfortable dressing up like Spider-Man. And I remember this comment getting rolled out during a parent come to the school to see what's going on. And I remember there's some black kids looking at this parent making this comment like, what? And almost, I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into the expression, but like, why are you introducing this topic to me? I was completely comfortable dressing up like Spider-Man. Now you're telling me that I wasn't supposed to be? Like, why did you create that in my mind? I think I don't think kids have these problems unless adults create those problems for the kids. And so, and by the way, none of what I'm saying is an argument against diversity in comics. Like, oh well, this is the excuse. You should have just white people. No, you shouldn't, because in many cases those are boring stories. You need diverse stories. So to the viewer's initial question, do I care about diversity? I do. I care about diverse stories, and when you have diverse stories, that tends to lead to diverse characters naturally, organically, if you will. It when you open up the whole world to not just the planet but the galaxy of different things you can tell in a comic book, and you truly lean into that, you get engaging, unique, creative stories, and you tend to then naturally get them with all different races, different genders, different sexualities. You get those things by default. Now, maybe not completely by default. Maybe you have to think about it a little bit more. It goes back to something I've said again in other videos. If you're going to tell a story in a region, you should do your homework. If you're doing a story in Japan, and you have all the characters that are being, that in your comic as just, the white people you see outside your apartment in New York, well, you've done a pretty poor job of representing Japan. You need to do your research, and that doesn't matter whether you're white or Asian or male or female or anything. You have to do your research into the story you're telling, and if you do that, then you'll have a good story. I think I care. So I care a lot about diversity in comics. I do, and I think most readers do as well. It's just the way I'm defining diversity here is diverse stories. And if you have diverse stories, you tend to get a diverse cast. That's been my experience. If you look at the stories that are not, the same old cookie cutter kind of template of a story, they tend to be, the cast is two-dimensional. Not two-dimensional, one-dimensional. There's nothing to it, no matter what color they are. And we're seeing that a lot now. It's kind of the point of that other video. I don't want to see Sam Wilson have to earn the shield again. Why? Because we saw that story. Why do I want to see that story over and over and over? And I think it does a disservice to black characters if the only story you can tell is them kind of having to fight racism. I'm not saying you do zero of those stories. I'm just saying you shouldn't do 100% of those stories. At some point, you need to have the black character out there kicking ass and being awesome. You should do that too. I think that's the thing. You're absolutely right. In the U.S., there's an absolute obsession with this topic, and it just feels like it's going down the exact wrong direction. It's going down the wrong path because increasingly we need to statistically make sure that all these this diversity is happening, and the more that happens, the less diverse the stories appear, the less they feel like anything is really happening in those stories. I think they wind up, uh, frankly, I think if you look at the last 10 years, Marvel in particular has introduced a ton of different, non-white characters. And I don't think I'm exaggerating. It feels like about 95% of them are gone, meaning they introduced them, they made some fuss over it, and then they probably got bored and stopped writing for it. They didn't have any story behind the demographical, like, check the box thing that they were doing. And it's a shame because I think some of these characters are pretty cool, that they would be great, but they got to lean into it. This is also one of those conversations that if you talk about it, you run the risk of somebody like, oh, I know what this person really wants. What this person really wants is just all white all the time. That's what they want because they're a racist. That's how a lot of people interpret what I'm saying right now. And I mean, sure, you can be disingenuous. You can certainly do whatever you want in listening to this, but you're only fooling yourself, and you're not actually accomplishing the goal you want to accomplish, which is, if you truly want to have more diverse characters in comics, you got to bring the more diverse story. If you do that, you will be successful. If you don't do that, you can just add it to the pile of nonsense that everybody's forgotten about. It's striking. Go back and look at, you can even do this with Comic-Con. Go to Comic-Con and go like month by month backward, 2018, 2017, 2016. And it is shocking how many characters are just, you will find like dozens of characters will come out of the woodwork for you of like, oh yeah, that guy. Oh, I forgot about her. Oh, wow. I mean, just gone. Anyway, thank you very much for the mail. I appreciate it. It was a good one, and great topic. I like that you poked a little bit, and that is appreciated. And you keep enjoying whatever is going on there outside the U.S. Thanks for listening.